Hey guys, it's George. Alright, so today I want to talk about, today's quick tip number 4. I want to talk about one rule that I use in composition that is like a standard rule and how I take it a step further. Basically the rule is the rule of thirds. It's a really simple, it's kind of the first rule you learn in photography and in composition, and it's basically you divide your image into thirds horizontal and thirds vertical, and you try to get your subjects within those thirds, like in the lines in between the thirds, or so that not everything is centered. It's more pleasing to the eye when things are not centered, when things are off to the sides. And I'm going to show you kind of an image that I took, and I'm going to crop it down using the rule of thirds. And also I want to bring in the other thing I use. It's called the Fibonacci Spiral, and it's basically a spiral that is created in nature, basically. There's like a mathematical algorithm where it's like 1.61 blah blah blah, basically it talks about how, I mean, a lot of things in nature have it. It's really an interesting number. So if you guys ever want to do some interesting reading on it, it's called a Fibonacci sequence, which is a numbered sequence. It's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and then it goes on, and it's also you can also see it as a spiral if you see it as a visual element. And the number itself is kind of called the golden ratio, and they call it that because it's found in nature. I mean, like seashells, nautilus shells kind of use that. The trajectory of like how hawks fly down to catch their prey is used in that. Like, it's just really weird how it's found in nature, and you know, who knows why. It's just a number that's found in nature. It's kind of interesting. Like, one of my favorite is honeybees follow that sequence because of the way there's like queens, there's female bees, and then there's drones, and like the queens and the females have 2 parents, but the drones only have 1 parent because they're from unfertilized eggs. So like it goes on and on and on, and it just follows that sequence, and it's really interesting. It's just found all over nature. But what does that mean for photography? Well, for photography, when you're taking your picture, you kind of want to use your rule of thirds. Now, what I'll show you is the Fibonacci spiral is actually very close to the rule of thirds, but it's got a little bit it's a little different, so it's not perfect. Like, the rule of thirds is almost too perfect for me. It's exactly thirds, and this is a little more fluid, and it's got a spiral, and it lets you put things in this spiral that makes it feel just a little more organic, I guess you could say, but still kind of within that rule of thirds that our eyes really enjoy. So the way I want to show it is I'm going to I took a picture. I went to the zoo. I took a picture of an owl, and the owl was standing on a perch, and it was pretty far away. And even I was at 200 millimeters on my camera, and I still couldn't get close enough to the owl as I wanted to, so I knew I was going to crop it. And here is the picture. Here's the uncropped picture. So I couldn't get any closer to this, but I knew I wanted it to be kind of more along these lines, like right here, and I knew I was going to crop it. Now, when I crop things, it's like this does not use the rule of thirds. His eye is right in the center. I was focusing right on his eye. That's why his eye is exactly in the center of this shot, right? Because I knew I was going to crop it anyway, so I didn't really have to. I wasn't composing rule of thirds in my camera because I couldn't get close enough. So the way I like to crop my things is I'll bring in my rule of thirds guide or my Fibonacci spiral guide, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Basically, I have a file that has both the rule of thirds, which is this green pattern, and my Fibonacci spiral, which is this. Right, so if you can see it, it kind of cuts it here. It's not exactly a third, but it's off to the side, and then there's all these little cuts. But first, let's do the rule of thirds. So what I do is I'll bring in this rule of thirds guide into the picture, and there it came in. And then I can reduce that and figure out where I want to crop it. And usually the way I do my rule of thirds is I come in close, you know, whatever I feel like is close enough head space, and then how much I want to crop down at the bottom. And here I'm also cropping because I don't want to have this kind of corner area here because it'll be distracting. So I'm going to crop that off. And then using my rule of thirds guide right here, I will probably do something like that where his eye is going to be right there, or maybe even over here. Probably use, well, maybe I'll put the middle of his head right on that rule of thirds line. And that's where I would crop it. So then, you know, I would go into my crop tool and crop it down to that. And this would be my final composition for my rule of thirds. I'm going to save that out so that we can compare later on. I'm going to save it as just a rule of thirds, just so we can compare to when I do the Fibonacci one and see how much different it is. It's kind of a weird thing because it's really not that different, but sometimes it gives you more leeway, I guess you could say. With this one, I don't see it to being too much of a difference, but okay, so now I'm going to go back to my original, and instead of bringing in the rule of thirds, I'm going to bring in the Fibonacci spiral. And there it is, and it's red, and you can kind of see it here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it vertically so that the spiral is going up because his head is towards the top of the image. And then I'm going to reduce it, and I'm going to try to find a spot where it feels like he's fitting nicely. And you know, it looks like it's going to be kind of right on that eye right there. And as you can see, the bird kind of fits perfectly into the spiral shape. So you get this movement coming down like this, of this bird coming in like that. His head is kind of in the shape of the spiral. And then, of course, I crop it using that guide. Oops, sorry. Right in the center of his eye. I can move it up just a tad so that I'm not touching that corner right there. Okay, now I'll crop it. And this is what my image looks like using the Fibonacci. And one of the reasons I actually like using the Fibonacci more than the rule of thirds is because I feel that when I use the rule of thirds, the bird ends up being closer to the middle of the frame, or the object, not always a bird, but whatever, ends up being closer to the middle of the frame than when I use the Fibonacci. And I don't really know why. Like, I feel like, and this is when I was really using it. Now I kind of do it visually. I don't actually use this guide as much because I can kind of do it visually. But so when I noticed that when I started using the Fibonacci, I would move it farther to the edge, and I tend to like farther to the edge and more negative space over here. So I started liking that more, and I started using it a lot more, and that's kind of how I trained my eye. And now whenever I do my crops, my eye almost automatically does them to the Fibonacci. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my original, close this, and I'm going to open up the two crops that I did so we can compare. And so this is the rule of thirds, and this is the Fibonacci, and they're actually pretty similar. Rule of thirds look like it cropped down just a little bit less, 16%, or this one actually cropped down a little bit less, but they're actually very, very similar. Here, actually, I can bring it in here, size it, and then we can do a. So this would be rule of thirds, and this is Fibonacci. and see how it's kind of a small difference, but like I said, with the Fibonacci, it seems to move it off to the edge a lot more than the rule of thirds whenever I do it. And I just started using that a lot more. And I recommend, you know, if you are going to start cropping things like this, to make yourself a guide. It's real easy, you know, open up a Photoshop document, divide it into thirds, and make yourself a guide. And if you need the Fibonacci Spiral, it's all over online. You can just search for Fibonacci Spiral and you'll find a JPEG of it, and then you can just bring it in. That's kind of how I created mine. And I guess that's it. That's what I'm going to leave this quick tip with, the Fibonacci Spiral. I like it. It's kind of cool. Only you'll really know that you used it, but compositionally, it will help your images feel a little more pleasing to the eye. Just like the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds will do the same thing. I tend to like the Fibonacci look just a little bit more. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this quick tip, and I will be bringing you guys more. So subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and give me some comments. Let me know what you guys want to talk about, what you guys want to hear about. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment, and I will gladly get back to you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.